For a bit of amusement, I was looking at Condé Nast Traveler Mag's 2023 Reader's Choice Awards for top islands to visit, and I decided to set aside my bias about what this kind of list would entail and take a digital trip to the highest rated islands. That excursion, broken into 8 regions, starts in the United States, where the top 2 rated islands are both from South Carolina. And number 1 is Hilton Head, an island whose name alone tells me what kind of journey I'm about to embark on. Left to my own devices, I would typically end up veering over to the neighboring and off-the-beaten-path islands, like Savage, Barataria, or Buck, or the tiny unnamed recursive islands nestled within Hilton Head itself. But I remind myself of the task at hand. Hilton Head has the familiar ornamentation of a place outfitted for tourism. The standout patterns of luxury resorts, the tamed beachfront, and the recognizable squiggles of a golf course and the surrounding development that accompanies it. The island has deep history going back thousands of years, but you'd never know it when viewed from above. Lest this first stop come across as an indictment of the place, I was pleasantly surprised to learn about the biodiversity to be found here. For such a developed island, there's a good share of plant and animal life, both on land and in the surrounding waters. Onward to the next island. This one being in Europe. An island large enough to be its own region, one of the 20 in Italy. An island that has been called home to the Nuragic civilization, the Phoenicians, the Vandals, and the Byzantines. The Italian island of Sardinia. 2,000 kilometers of rugged coastline and mountains, getting close to 2,000 meters in height, with forests and winding roads, small Italian towns scattered throughout, with rivers and lakes, most of which are artificial, and having a wide array of plant and animal life, unsurprisingly with some endemic species. A good quarter of the island has been reserved in the form of national and regional parks and reserves. And as if there's not already too much to explore here, the island is surrounded by a ton of smaller islands, and even some recursive ones. I hold myself back, knowing that if I zoom in further, I'll be lost for hours. And right now, there's a list to get through. And so I head over to the Caribbean and the Atlantic, to an archipelago whose name alone conjures up a scene of middle-class vacations and cruise ships, of pink sand beaches and cerulean ocean. Bermuda, a British overseas territory consisting of 181 islands. A lot to explore, to be sure, but I'm quickly taken in by a small, unimportant question. Whether the islands in Harrington Sound of Main Island would be considered recursive or not. Since, by definition, the sound is connected to the ocean, does that disqualify Rabbit, Trunk, Crow, Halls, and Turtle Islands? I'm not sure the question matters, but that's precisely why I'm asking it. If you came here for any kind of informative overview of Bermuda, you're bound to be sorely disappointed. But if you're fine getting lost with me for a bit, let's leave Trunk Island behind, zoom back out, and continue on to our next destination on this list. And as we effortlessly flit across the globe, taking a moment to appreciate how far away from any mainland Bermuda is. The closest landmass, being North Carolina, is 1,000 kilometers away. Heading southeast to Central and South America, Fernando de Noronha in Brazil, another archipelago, a Russian nesting doll of a gift to the island enthusiast. I promise myself I'll keep a wider view this time, having learned next to nothing about Bermuda. And I feel confident I'll be able to keep to that. This is the first time I've ever heard of or seen this place, a fresh feeling that never gets old. Only the main island of the 21 volcanic islands and islets is inhabited, and even that has a majority of untouched land. It's beautiful from above, despite the inconsistent satellite captures. It was discovered in 1503 by a Portuguese expedition that carried the namesake, an Amerigo Vespucci. Well, according to which theory you subscribe to. Regardless, it would quickly become a central location in the trade of Brazil wood. It was briefly colonized by the French, and it served as a penal colony, and was home to a prison starting in the late 18th century. The main economic driver is now tourism, which shouldn't be surprising given that we ended up here by following Condé Nast Traveler's top islands list. And I'm inclined to stay a bit longer, but we're only halfway through that list, and there's so many islands beyond that. So to Mexico. An island that makes me think this list has a bit more to it than I first thought. Isla Holbox, a narrow and long island that is prone to severe hurricane damage. It was completely destroyed once back in 1886, but it was rebuilt and has remained inhabited. There's a wide variety of bird life, including pelicans and flamingos, and the growing tourism industry has been propelled by the fishing opportunities, as well as the ability to see whale sharks here. It's one of those islands largely without cars. People mostly get around on golf carts and scooters. The town of Holbox is on the far western tip, and the rest of the island is largely just untouched nature, with a long, idyllic beach that's popular for kiteboarding. Next up, the top pick in Australia and the South Pacific comes as no surprise, an archipelago country with hundreds of islands and islets, the majority of which are uninhabited. Boiling down a place like this with such a deep history going back thousands of years, and with so much land, people, flora, and fauna, it almost feels comical. It obviously deserves extended study, reflection, and a firm grasp on history. I don't trust myself to be the one to do that, especially in the context of exploring this top islands list. So I do what I do best, zooming into one of the apparently unnamed islands that are part of the Republic of Fiji. I land on this tiny idyllic island, apparently uninhabited by humans and calmingly simple when viewed from above. Shallow teal waters, white sand beach, lush green dense forest. That's it. By pausing on this tiny corner of the world in Melanesia, I feel a moment of peace and plant the seed of curiosity. I'll come back to Fiji to dedicate more time learning about and experiencing this amazing place. It's no wonder it would make it on a top islands list, although it does seem a bit of a Trojan horse. For now, it's time to head over to the penultimate region on this list, Africa and the Indian Ocean. A 6-island archipelago in Mozambique, formed by sand deposited by the Save River, the Bazaruto Archipelago, a place rich with sea life, including the whale shark. I wondered if any individual shark has ever seen both Mozambique and Mexico. They've been known to travel further distances. The Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute tracked a female whale shark covering 20,000 kilometers. But I digress. I zoomed into Santa Carolina, also called Paradise Island. Paradise seems to have been lost, with an abandoned hotel and airstrip slowly retreating into nature ever since Mozambique gained independence in 1975. A different story over on the largest island of the archipelago, Bazaruto. The sandy island is mostly untouched, being a national park, but there are a few very manicured areas standing out. 5-star hotels, resorts, and lodges. 2 runways, one in the south and one in the north. Zooming out and making our way over to the final region, Asia. Bali, Indonesia. Another island on the list that comes with its fair share of connotation, even baggage. Another beautiful island with millennia of history, which in whatever age it is we are living in, has been co-opted to revolve around the whims of tourism. Or maybe that's a cynical take. It's something I fall prey to often, applying an overly black and white narrative to something complicated and gray, casting the island in the role of protagonist and those who are trying to appreciate it as some kind of collective antagonist. It's unoriginal, uninteresting, and untrue. But when I zoom in a bit further, I can see an island intact, an island with an active volcano, an island with thousands of species in the plant and animal kingdoms. And now, as I zoom out from this final island, I reflect on how this somewhat haphazard multi-island trip was one of introspection as much as anything else. I suppose this is why we travel, whether led by our own instincts or by a list curated in Condé Nast Traveler magazine. Thank you for joining me. I've said too little, I've said too much, and I'm thankful for the space to explore.